I'm giving you one last chance to be the wife I deserve. He was already sitting at the kitchen table when I walked in. That alone felt wrong. The kids weren't home. No backpacks by the door. No half-finished homework spread across the counter. The house felt staged, too quiet, too intentional, like a scene that had been set without my input. I had come home early, 6:30, early for me, because work had finally loosened its grip for one evening. On the way back, I'd picked up dinner, thinking we could have a simple family night. Nothing special, just food, conversation, something normal. He didn't acknowledge the bags when I set them down. He didn't look up right away. His hands were folded on the table, shoulders relaxed, posture steady. He looked prepared. "Sit," he said. Not angry, not raised, just firm, the kind of voice that assumed compliance. I sat. That was when I noticed the paper, a single sheet placed precisely in front of him. Straight edges, clean spacing, like presentation mattered, like if it looked orderly enough, it would justify what was coming. I picked it up, a numbered list. Be more available at home and prioritize the family over work. Stop being so critical and make home a place where I feel supported and respected. Take full responsibility for the kids' schedules, school communication, and daily routines. Make me feel desired. No more work excuses. Marriage counseling. Better communication. My chest tightened, not from surprise, but from recognition. I had heard versions of this for years. Different words. Same message. Whatever I was doing, it wasn't enough. And somehow, it was always my responsibility to fix. "I've been thinking about this for a while," he said, leaning back slightly. "I'm giving you one last chance to be the wife I deserve." There it was. The wife I deserve. As if 14 years together, 11 married, 2 children, a household that ran because I held it together, had all been some kind of provisional arrangement. He watched my face carefully, waiting, confident, certain I would respond the way I always had. Apologize, explain, promise to try harder. "Thank you for that," I said quietly. Relief crossed his face, a small, satisfied smile. He thought this was working. "Hold on," I added, standing. "Let me get something." I walked to my home office, unlocked the drawer, and took out the envelope I'd brought home from work the day before. It was already sealed, already decided. When I placed it on the table, his smile faltered. "What's that?" he asked. "Divorce papers." He let out a short laugh, like I'd made a bad joke. Then he saw the letterhead. And for the first time, he didn't look in control. He looked stunned, because the consequence he'd been threatening me with was the one thing he never believed I'd accept. The criticism didn't arrive all at once. That's what made it easy to live with, for a while. It came in small, reasonable-sounding comments, offhand remarks, sighs that carried meaning without words. If I came home after a long day and sat down for 5 minutes before engaging, he'd say things like, "Must be nice to just shut off," as if the hours I spent earning our living didn't count as effort. If I suggested we stick to a budget, asked whether we really needed another $200 purchase for something non-essential, his tone would shift, not angry, injured. "So now I have to justify everything I spend? You don't trust me. I already gave up my career. Is that not enough?" The implication was always the same. If I questioned anything, I was ungrateful. No matter how full my day had been, there was always something I'd missed, something I hadn't done right. If the dishwasher was loaded inefficiently, if I forgot to respond to a school email fast enough, if I planned a weekend outing that wasn't fun enough or didn't think through every detail. I could work a 12-hour day, come home, help with homework, handle bedtime, answer emails from school, and still be told, casually, that I wasn't present enough. "You don't make me feel special anymore," he'd say. "You never plan anything romantic." Other wives manage to balance work and family better than this. That last one came up often. His friends' wives were apparently flawless, always put together, always attentive, always supportive. They worked, or didn't, but somehow never seemed tired, never overwhelmed, never distracted. I learned to nod, to absorb it, to let it pass through me without reaction. Arguing only made it worse. If I defended myself, I was being defensive. If I stayed quiet, I was being dismissive. If I apologized, it wasn't enough unless it came with visible change. The goalposts moved constantly. The breaking point wasn't a dramatic blow-up, it was exhaustion. Accumulated, layered, quiet. About 8 months before the night with the list, I came home after one of the worst weeks I'd had in years. A major project deadline, 60-hour weeks, late nights, constant pressure. By Friday, I felt hollowed out. The kids were already asleep when I walked in. I set my bag down and said carefully, "It's been a rough week. Do you mind if I take a few minutes to decompress?" He was on the couch, watching a reality show. He didn't look at me. "Must be nice," he said. "I've been with the kids all week. When do I get to decompress?" I didn't respond. I didn't have the energy. I went to shower instead. When I came out, towel around my shoulders, hair still dripping, he was standing in the hallway, arms crossed, expression set. "We need to talk about our marriage." I already knew how this would go. "I'm not happy," he said. "I haven't been for years. And honestly, I don't think you even care." "I do care," I said. "I work hard for this family." "Do you?" he asked. "Because it doesn't feel like it. I feel invisible, unappreciated, like I'm just here supporting your life while you get to have a career." Something inside me shifted. I'd heard versions of this speech dozens of times, always framed the same way, always ending in the same place, me being told I needed to do better. "What do you want me to do?" I asked genuinely. "Be better," he said. "Be the wife I deserve." That phrase again. I nodded. I said I'd try. He seemed satisfied, went back to his show. I went to bed and stared at the ceiling long after the house went quiet. And the next morning, I called a divorce attorney. Not impulsively. I'd been thinking about it for over a year. That night didn't create the problem. It just confirmed what I already knew. This was never going to get better. After that night, the shower, the hallway conversation, the words, "be the wife I deserve," things went quiet. Not better, just quieter. For a few weeks, we moved around each other carefully, like two people pretending the floor wasn't cracked beneath them. I worked. He stayed home. The kids were fine. On the surface, life was tolerable. I didn't bring up divorce. He didn't bring up dissatisfaction. It felt like a ceasefire, not peace. I kept doing what I'd always done, working long hours, carrying the mental load, making sure nothing visibly collapsed. Part of me still hoped something might shift, that maybe the threat of losing me would make him see what I'd been holding together. I know now how naive that was. Last Tuesday, I came home early, 6:30. Early enough that I thought, maybe we could have dinner together. I picked up food on the way back. Nothing elaborate, just enough for a normal family night. When I walked in, the house was silent. Too silent. The kids weren't home. "They're at my sister's," he said from the kitchen before I even asked. He was sitting at the table, waiting. The table was clear except for a single sheet of paper. I already knew what it was before I picked it up. A list. Typed, numbered, clean. I stood there reading while he watched me, arms crossed now, posture relaxed, like he'd rehearsed this moment and felt confident in the outcome. "I've been thinking about this for a while," he said. "I'm giving you one last chance to be the wife I deserve." He didn't raise his voice. He didn't threaten outright. He didn't need to. The implication hung there. Agree, or this marriage doesn't continue. I read through the list slowly, even though every item felt familiar. Each demand framed as reasonable. Each expectation positioned as something any good wife should be able to meet. When I looked up, he was smiling. Not kindly, expectantly. "Thank you for that," I said. Relief crossed his face. He thought this was working. Thought I was finally falling back into line. "I appreciate you being clear about what you want," I added. He nodded. "I knew you'd understand eventually. I've been patient." "Hold on," I said, lifting a hand. "Let me get something." I went to my home office, unlocked the filing cabinet, and pulled out the envelope I'd brought home from work the day before. It had been sitting there, waiting. 3 months' worth of preparation sealed inside. When I placed it on the table, his smile faltered. "What's that?" he asked. "Divorce papers." He laughed, a short, dismissive sound. "Very funny. I'm not joking." I watched the moment land. The color drained from his face as he opened the envelope, saw the letterhead, saw the petition, the proposed custody arrangement, the asset division. "You can't be serious." "I am." "All of this because of a list?" he snapped. "I give you reasonable requests and you respond with divorce?" "It's not about the list," I said calmly. "It's about the last 6 years." He stood abruptly. I was trying to save our marriage. "No," I said. "You were trying to get me to agree to your terms under the threat of divorce. I'm just accepting the divorce. On my terms." He started yelling after that. Said I was overreacting. Said I was abandoning the family. Said I was throwing away 14 years over nothing. Accused me of choosing my career over him, over the kids. I let him get it out. Then I said, "I'm going to pick up the kids from your sisters. We'll talk logistics when I get back." I didn't wait for a response. At his sister's house, I smiled for the kids. Acted normal, told them nothing. They didn't need to be pulled into adult damage yet. When we got home, he was gone. Later that night, he texted me. I'm staying at my mom's until you come to your senses. I stared at the screen for a long moment before replying, I'll have the kids ready for you to pick up at 6 p.m. tomorrow. Let's keep this civil for their sake. He didn't respond. That was 5 days ago. I thought that would be the worst of it. I was wrong. Because once the papers were real, once control slipped out of his hands, everything changed. And that was when the fallout truly began. The first night after he left, the house felt unfamiliar. Not empty, exposed. I tucked the kids into bed like always, read the same stories, answered the same questions about tomorrow's schedule. They didn't sense the shift yet, not fully. Children are remarkably good at trusting the stability adults pretend still exists. When their doors finally closed, I stood in the hallway longer than necessary, listening to the quiet. No television murmuring from the living room. No footsteps pacing behind me. Just space. I didn't cry. Not because I wasn't hurting, but because I was bracing. I knew him well enough to understand this wasn't over. Men like him didn't lose control quietly. They escalated when their authority was challenged. The next morning, I went to work as usual. Emails, meetings, deadlines. I answered questions, nodded in the right places, spoke in complete sentences. No one knew my marriage had detonated in my kitchen less than 24 hours earlier. There was something grounding about that, about being competent in at least one area of my life. By the afternoon, my phone started buzzing. Missed calls, texts, from him, from his mother. I didn't answer. That night, his mother showed up. She rang the doorbell and then knocked anyway, sharp and insistent, like urgency alone could force compliance. He stood a few steps behind her, arms crossed, jaw tight. I opened the door but didn't invite them in. We need to talk sense into you, his mother said immediately, stepping forward as if the house were still hers to claim. This isn't your business, I replied evenly. Her eyes narrowed. It becomes my business when you're destroying my son's life and destabilizing my grandchildren. I'm not destroying anything, I said. I filed for divorce. That's the same thing, she snapped. He stayed quiet at first. Let her speak for him. He always had. She blindsided me, he finally said, his voice tight. One list, one attempt to fix things, and she goes nuclear. One list after 6 years of lists, I said. 6 years of being told I wasn't enough. His mother scoffed. Every marriage has complaints. You work through them. And how did that work out for you? I asked. Her face flushed. Everyone knew her marriage had been miserable for decades. That's different, she said. Is it? He stepped forward then, anger flashing across his face. Fine. If this is how you want it, I'm getting the house. I'm getting the kids, and you're going to pay for this. That's not how the law works, I said calmly, but you're welcome to try. They left shortly after that, angry, loud, unresolved. An hour later, I realized the kids were gone. He had taken them. No warning, no discussion. Just loaded them into his mother's car while she kept me occupied with shouting. I called my lawyer immediately. He can't do that, I said. My voice shook for the first time. He actually can, my lawyer replied. There's no custody order yet. You both have equal rights. So what do? We file for emergency temporary custody. Today. We did. By the end of the afternoon, the paperwork was filed. By Thursday, a hearing was scheduled for the following week. That's when the formal demands started arriving. Through his lawyer, he'd gotten one fast. He was demanding exclusive use of the marital home, primary custody of the children, temporary spousal support of $4,500 a month, and child support on top of that. His argument was simple. He was a stay-at-home parent with no income. I had blindsided him with divorce papers after he tried to save the marriage. He needed support to maintain the children's standard of living. My lawyer's response was firm. He left the marital home voluntarily. I was the primary breadwinner. I was fully capable of caring for the children. Support should be based on need, not entitlement. We proposed 50-50 custody. Then came the move I hadn't anticipated. Friday morning, I got a call from HR. There's been an anonymous complaint filed against you, the woman said carefully. Potential misconduct, misuse of company resources. My stomach dropped. What kind of misconduct? We can't disclose details yet. There will be an investigation. I called my lawyer the moment I hung up. She didn't sound surprised. Classic, she said. He's trying to threaten your income. I sat at my desk, staring at the wall, heart racing. For the first time since the papers hit the table, I felt afraid. Not of losing him, but of how far he might go to punish me for refusing to stay. And that was when it became clear. This divorce wasn't going to be about closure. It was going to be a war of control. And he wasn't done yet. The HR investigation didn't explode the way I feared. It simmered. That was worse. For a week, I worked under a low, constant hum of anxiety. Every email reread twice, every calendar entry scrutinized, every casual conversation with a colleague suddenly feeling like it could be misinterpreted. The complaint itself was vague. Accusations about misuse of company time, creating a hostile environment. Nothing concrete, nothing provable. Which was the point. My boss called me into his office on Monday. I have to investigate this formally, he said, hands folded on the desk. But off the record, the timing is suspicious. I didn't argue. I'm going through a divorce, I said. It's contentious. He nodded slowly. That's what I thought. Just keep doing your job. If there's nothing there, this will pass. And it did. By the end of the week, HR closed the investigation. No findings, no action, no apology either, but at least my income was intact. I didn't celebrate, because while that front collapsed, another opened. I found out at a gas station. My card was declined. I tried again. Same result. Embarrassed, I paid with another card and sat in the car afterward, heart pounding, refreshing my banking app. $8,000 was gone. Withdrawn that morning from our joint savings account, the one we use for the kids' activities, emergencies, things we'd agreed not to touch casually. I called the bank. Yes, the representative confirmed. Your husband made the withdrawal. Can I freeze the account? Both names are on it. Either party can withdraw, but I can note that you're disputing further transactions. I hung up and called my lawyer. She exhaled sharply. Asset protection maneuver, or punishment, sometimes both. What do we do? Emergency motion to freeze marital assets. Today. The judge was not impressed. By the next afternoon, all marital accounts were frozen pending division. He was ordered to return $6,000 of the $8,000 he'd taken. The remaining $2,000 had already gone to his attorney retainer and living expenses at his mother's house. It didn't make me feel better. It made me angry. Because the money wasn't the point. The control was. Then came mediation. We sat in a neutral office with neutral furniture and a mediator who looked like she'd seen every version of this story before. His lawyer presented first. The narrative was familiar. Abandoned husband, stay-at-home parent, no income, wife focused on her career, divorce filed without warning. He was simply trying to save the marriage. He needed time, support, fairness. My lawyer followed. Years of documented criticism, a clear pattern of emotional pressure, evidence of an ultimatum. Be the wife I deserve, or this marriage ends. I had kept a journal for 2 years, originally at my therapist's suggestion. Dates, quotes, context. I never imagined it would matter legally. Then his lawyer made the offer. My client is willing to consider reconciliation, she said smoothly, if my client's wife agrees to couples counseling and a 90-day delay in proceedings. The mediator looked at me. Would you consider that? No. He stared at me like I'd insulted him. Why not? He asked. You won't even try? I've been trying for 6 years, I said. I'm done trying. His lawyer pivoted. My client feels blindsided, perhaps with better communication. Your client gave me a list of demands and threatened divorce if I didn't comply, I said evenly. I accepted the divorce. The mediator let him speak after that. He unraveled. Raised voice. Accusations. Claims that I never listened, never cared, always had to be right. The mediator waited until he ran out of breath. Sir, she said calmly, mediation works when both parties are willing to negotiate in good faith. Do you want to continue? He stood up and walked out. His lawyer followed, looking exhausted. Mine turned to me afterward. That actually helps us. I didn't feel helped. I felt tired. The temporary custody hearing came next. His lawyer argued that he was the primary caregiver, that the children's primary attachment was to him, that my work hours made equal custody impractical, that the traditional arrangement should continue. My lawyer countered with documentation. Bath times, bedtimes, homework, weekend routines, the flexibility of my schedule, the fact that he had moved into his mother's house, one spare bedroom for both kids, while the marital home remained stable. Then the judge asked him a question that changed the tone of the room. What are your plans for employment going forward? He didn't hesitate. I don't think it's fair to expect me to work after nearly a decade of raising children. That's why I need adequate support. The judge raised an eyebrow. You have a college degree. Yes, but... And the children are both in school full-time. Yes, but finding work after being out so long. I'm not suggesting immediate employment, the judge said, but spousal support is rehabilitative, not permanent. The ruling came down quickly. 50-50 custody. Marital home awarded to me temporarily since he left voluntarily. Spousal support set at $2,200 a month, half of what he requested. Child support calculated at $850 based on income difference and shared custody. He was furious. In the parking lot afterward, he confronted me. "You're trying to destroy me." "I'm trying to divorce fairly," I said. "How is this fair? You make $140,000 a year. I'm getting scraps." "You have no housing expenses right now," I replied, "and the expectation is that you'll eventually support yourself." I gave up my career for this family. And I supported this family for 11 years, I said. We both contributed. Now we're separating contributions. He told me I'd wasted his life. I didn't respond. I got in my car and drove home. And I knew, with a certainty that settled deep in my chest, this was no longer about saving anything. This was about consequences. And he was only beginning to understand them. The house felt larger after the hearing. Not because anything had changed physically, but because the silence had weight now. The kids were with him that week. Their rooms were untouched, beds made the way I always left them, small shoes lined neatly by the door, like they were waiting for permission to move again. I should have felt relief. On paper, things had gone my way. 50-50 custody, the house, a structure, boundaries. Proof that I wasn't irrational or cruel or reckless for leaving. But standing alone in that quiet, I didn't feel victorious. I felt hollow. That night, I sat at the kitchen table, the same one where he'd slid the list toward me weeks earlier, and stared at the surface for a long time. I replayed the hearing in my head, the judge's words, his anger in the parking lot, the way he'd looked at me like I'd betrayed him by refusing to carry him anymore. I told myself I could handle that. What I wasn't prepared for was the phone call from my oldest a few days later. "Mom," he said cautiously, not upset, not crying, just careful, like he didn't want to step on something fragile. "Hey, sweetheart," I said, forcing brightness into my voice. "What's up?" There was a pause. "Why did you want to leave us?" The question landed in my chest like a dropped weight. I closed my eyes. "I didn't leave you," I said slowly. "Your dad and I are separating. That's different." "But Dad said—" He hesitated. "He said Mommy decided she didn't want to live with us anymore." I felt my throat tighten, not with anger, but with something colder. Recognition. This wasn't an accident. This wasn't a misunderstanding. This was careful, measured, just vague enough to sound reasonable. "I love you exactly the same," I said, keeping my voice steady. "I will always be your mom. The only thing changing is that you have 2 homes now. But you chose this," he said softly, not accusing, just repeating. I swallowed. "Your dad and I both made choices," I said, "and none of them change how much we love you." He accepted that, for now. Kids want answers, but they also want permission to stop asking. When we hung up, I sat there holding my phone long after the screen went dark. That was the moment something inside me cracked. Not because he'd lied, but because he'd used our children to make himself feel right. Over the next week, the pattern became clearer. Subtle comments, shifts in tone, nothing overt, nothing I could point to and say this is wrong without sounding defensive. "Dad said this is hard for him. Dad said you're really busy. Dad said you wanted things to be different." Always framed gently, always positioned so I was the one who'd chosen to disrupt their lives. I documented everything. Dates, words, context. My lawyer confirmed what I already knew. This is subtle parental alienation. Keep records. If it escalates, we address it. Escalates. The word echoed in my head long after the call ended. At night, alone in my bed, doubt crept in. Not about the divorce, but about myself. Had I given up too easily? Had I failed them by not enduring more? Would they remember me as the one who walked away? I replayed the years in my head. The exhaustion, the criticism, the way no amount of effort had ever been enough. I reminded myself why I'd left. I reminded myself that staying would have taught them something worse, that love meant erasing yourself to keep someone else comfortable. But logic didn't quiet the ache. The hardest part wasn't losing my marriage. It was losing control of the story my children were being told. I couldn't defend myself without sounding like the villain. I couldn't explain the truth without burdening them with adult pain. So I did the only thing I could. I stayed consistent. I showed up. I listened. I didn't correct their father in front of them. I didn't counter his narrative with my own. I let my actions speak in the only language children trust, presence. Still, there were nights I sat on the edge of the bed, staring at the floor, wondering if strength looked indistinguishable from cruelty when you were 8 years old. This was the lowest point. Not the courtroom, not the money, not the threats. This. The quiet fear that no matter how right my decision was, the cost might be paid in misunderstandings I couldn't fix yet. But somewhere beneath that fear, something else settled in. Resolve. I couldn't control what he said, but I could control who I was. And I would not let my children grow up believing their mother left because she didn't love them. I would protect the truth, even if it took years for it to be understood. The shift didn't happen all at once. There was no dramatic revelation, no moment where everything suddenly made sense and stopped hurting. What happened instead was quieter and far more solid. It started in my lawyer's office. I laid everything out on the table, the journal entries, the timeline, notes from the HR investigation, bank records, the dates I'd written down after phone calls with the kids, exact phrasing, context, patterns. She didn't interrupt. When I finished, she leaned back in her chair and said, "This isn't just a contentious divorce." I waited. "This is a pattern of control," she continued. "Financial pressure, threats to your income, emotional manipulation, and now, subtle alienation involving the kids." I felt something loosen in my chest. Not relief, notice. "I'm not imagining it," I said. "No," she replied calmly. "You're documenting it." That distinction mattered more than I expected. Up until then, everything I'd done had been reactive, responding, defending, explaining, trying to keep up with whatever move came next. For the first time, I understood that reacting was exactly what kept me trapped. "So what do we do?" I asked. "We stopped giving him access to you," she said, emotionally and logistically. That was the turning point. I moved all communication to the co-parenting app. No texts, no calls, no side conversations, no explanations beyond what was required. Logistics only. Dates, times, facts. The effect was immediate. His messages changed tone within days. First came irritation. "Why are you being so cold? This is unnecessary. We can talk like adults." Then came the pivot. "Maybe we should slow this down. Think about the kids. We could try counseling." I recognized the move for what it was, not regret, not accountability, but the realization that he was losing leverage. At mediation, he tried again. His lawyer suggested a 90-day delay. Couples counseling, space to cool off, framed as generosity, as reason. The mediator looked at me. "Would you consider that?" "No," I said. No explanation, no justification. Just no. He reacted exactly the way he always had when he didn't get what he wanted. He raised his voice, accused me of being rigid, claimed I was impossible to work with, that I never listened, that I always had to win. The mediator let him speak for a moment, then cut in gently. "Sir," she said, "mediation works when both parties are willing to negotiate in good faith. Do you want to continue?" He stood up and walked out. That was the first time I saw it clearly. When there was no one left to pressure, no one to guilt, no one to intimidate, he didn't negotiate. He withdrew. The hearings that followed reflected the same thing. Judges don't respond to emotion. They respond to patterns, to documentation, to consistency. Every time he framed himself as the wronged party, the facts undercut the narrative. He'd left the marital home. He'd withdrawn funds without agreement. He'd filed complaints that went nowhere. He resisted any expectation of self-sufficiency while demanding continued support. Meanwhile, I showed up, prepared, calm, consistent. I didn't look like someone acting out of spite. I looked like someone who had thought this through. The rulings didn't feel like a victory, but they felt fair. And more importantly, they felt grounded in reality, not performance. The biggest shift, though, happened outside the courtroom. I stopped trying to manage his feelings. I stopped correcting his version of events. I stopped explaining myself to people who weren't actually listening. When the kids repeated things he'd said, softly, carefully, I didn't counter with my own story. I answered with presence, with routine, with love that didn't fluctuate. Over time, the questions changed. Less, "Why did you leave?" More, "Are we okay?" And that was enough. One night, sitting alone after they'd gone to bed, I realized something quietly profound. I hadn't left impulsively. I had left deliberately. After years of trying, after months of preparation, after exhausting every internal argument that told me to stay smaller, quieter, more accommodating. The turning point wasn't when I filed. It was when I stopped asking for permission to protect myself and my children. From that moment on, the dynamic shifted. He could still be angry. He could still resist. He could still tell his version of the story. But he no longer controlled the frame. And without that control, everything else began to unravel. The final asset hearing wasn't dramatic. There were no raised voices, no speeches, no grandstanding, Just a courtroom that felt smaller than I expected, and a judge who looked tired in the way people do when they've seen the same arguments too many times. This was the hearing that closed everything. Not custody, not temporary orders, not mediation. This was about money, about division, about what was left once the marriage itself was already gone. His lawyer went first. She asked for a 60-40 split in his favor, 5 years of spousal support, a continuation of the lifestyle we'd had before, framed as fairness. After all, he'd sacrificed his career. His earning capacity was diminished. He'd stayed home. He'd supported my career. I listened without reacting. I had learned by then that reaction was a currency I no longer needed to spend. My lawyer stood and laid out the numbers. Not feelings, not intentions, numbers. House equity, retirement accounts, mostly funded by my income, savings post-freeze, 2 vehicles, minimal debt. She spoke calmly, methodically. Support was rehabilitative. Asset division was not a reward for suffering. The law didn't exist to preserve lifestyles, it existed to dissolve marriages equitably. The judge leaned forward. The law does not guarantee lifestyle maintenance after divorce, he said. It wasn't said harshly, just plainly, like gravity. That was when I saw it, panic flicker across my husband's face. He leaned toward his lawyer and whispered. She nodded, then stood. Your Honor, may we request a brief recess? Granted. They huddled for 15 minutes that felt longer than the entire marriage. When they returned, the request had changed. 3 years of spousal support, $2,500 a month, flat. My lawyer turned to me, quietly. Do you want to counter? I thought about it. Not about winning, about ending. $2,200, I said, 3 years, flat. No explanation, no justification, just a number. There was more whispering, more calculating. Then, accepted. That was it. No gavel slam, no announcement. Just a clerk noting the agreement and the judge moving on to the next case. I didn't feel relief. I felt empty. Outside the courtroom, he confronted me one last time. You're trying to destroy me, he said. I'm divorcing you, I replied. Fairly. You make $140,000 a year, he snapped. I get scraps. You're living rent-free, I said evenly, and the expectation is that you'll support yourself. I gave up my career for this family. And I supported this family for 11 years, I said. We both contributed. Now we're separating contributions. He stared at me like he wanted another argument. One more chance to shift the ground. I didn't give it to him. I got in my car and drove home. After that, the noise stopped. Not immediately, but noticeably. There were no more long emails. No more demands disguised as concern. No more dramatic threats. Communication narrowed to logistics on the co-parenting app. Pickups, drop-offs, school notices. When there was nothing left to negotiate, he had nothing left to say. The financial consequences settled in quietly. Attorney fees ate into his share. The support payments became something he had to plan around, not demand. The idea of temporary living with his mother stretched into weeks, then months. I heard about it indirectly, through tone, through the kids, through the way his messages lost their edge and gained something heavier. Resignation. The narrative he'd relied on, the wronged husband, abandoned stay-at-home parent, stopped working once the court was done. Friends stopped asking questions. Family stopped calling to intervene. No one was outraged anymore. The divorce was over. And without an audience, the performance ended. One evening, a message came through the app that wasn't logistical. It wasn't angry. It wasn't blaming. It was just tired. I read it. I didn't respond. Not out of spite, not to punish him, but because there was nothing left for me to carry. The legal battles were done. The numbers were set. The obligations were clear. What remained weren't arguments or ultimatums, just consequences. Quiet, permanent, and no longer mine to manage. The divorce was finalized a few weeks later. There was no ceremony to it, just paperwork, signatures, dates stamped in ink. The house sold quickly. The market helped. We split the equity evenly, and I used my portion as a down payment on a smaller place closer to the kids' school. 3 bedrooms. Nothing extravagant. But each child had their own room when they were with me, and that mattered more than square footage ever had. Life didn't become easy. It became quieter. The kind of quiet where I didn't wake up bracing myself for criticism, where I didn't mentally rehearse apologies before I even walked through the door. Some nights were lonely. I won't pretend otherwise. I missed having a partner in theory, the idea of one, but I didn't miss being constantly told I was failing. Before the kids settled into the new routine, I sat down with them one evening at the kitchen table. Not to explain legal details, not to defend myself, and not to talk about their father. I told them the only things that actually mattered, that this wasn't their fault, that nothing they did caused it, that nothing they could do would fix it. I told them they were allowed to feel sad, or angry, or confused, that loving both parents wasn't disloyalty, that having two homes didn't mean they were losing one. Nothing about this changes how much you're loved, I said, by either of us. They asked questions. Some I could answer, some I couldn't. Not yet. I didn't rush them. I didn't force reassurance. I just stayed present. That was my job now. Co-parenting settled into boundaries. All communication stayed on the app. No late-night conversations, no emotional spillover, just logistics. It kept things civil. It kept things safe. About 3 weeks after the decree, he showed up at my new place during his off week. The kids weren't with me. "Can we talk?" he asked. I stood in the doorway and didn't invite him in. About what? Us, this, everything. He talked about the kids needing both parents under one roof, about how 11 years should mean something, about how he missed his life. I listened. Then I said the truth he wasn't ready for. "You miss your life," I said. "Not me." He didn't argue. He didn't apologize either. He just stood there for a moment, then left. He hasn't tried again since. Here's what I've learned. Divorce isn't about winning or losing. The court battles, the money, the schedules, that's logistics. The real outcome is the life you build afterward. I'm building one where my children see a mother who doesn't disappear to keep the peace, where love doesn't require self-erasure, where ultimatums aren't confused for commitment. He told me he was giving me one last chance to be the wife he deserved. What he didn't realize was that he was giving me one last chance to leave with dignity. And I took it. If you're listening to this and something feels uncomfortably familiar, I want you to hear this clearly. Being committed does not mean being consumed. Loving someone does not require disappearing inside their expectations. And staying is not automatically the more moral choice if staying is slowly erasing you. Sometimes the bravest thing a woman can do is stop trying to be enough for someone who keeps moving the finish line. I didn't leave because I didn't care. I left because I cared enough to protect my children, to protect my sanity, and to protect the version of myself they deserve to grow up seeing. If you've been in a relationship where nothing you did was ever enough, you're not imagining it. And if someone gave you an ultimatum they never expected you to accept, remember this. You always have the right to choose dignity. Thank you to everyone who shared their stories, their support, and their hard-earned lessons in the comments. You're not alone in this, even when it feels that way. If this story resonated with you, don't forget to like, comment, share, and subscribe for more real-life stories about boundaries, consequences, and choosing yourself when it matters most. I'll see you in the next one.